I'll make a start. It's 10 o'clock, so I'll start with the opening statement. Can I welcome all members and officers to this meeting, the Democratic Services Committee, which will be held as a hybrid meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is practical even, following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting either from the Council chamber or from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting. In respect of cameras, I would be grateful if members could keep them on for the duration of the meeting. This is part of a new trial to test how well this works. Those speaking may switch their microphones on at that point, but I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, and at all other times you keep your microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure that the connection remains as stable as possible. Whether in the chamber or remote, if any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so as well, please. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting, and I will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary, we'll mute those not being used. Is it working? I would also like to ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when, and invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use, please. I will now proceed to agenda business. Firstly, apologies for absence. I've got Councillor Paula Ford and Councillor Elaine Winstanley. Do we have any others, Tingran?
No, Chair. Can I just pause for 1 minute? We're just having a technical difficulty with the actual screen.
Yeah,
bear with me. I'm just trying to resolve that.
Yeah, I don't know if people can hear remotely. We're just having a little technical difficulty. Be back with you shortly. Welcome back. So we've had apologies. I'll do that again. Apologies for absence. I've said the apologies that I've received. Is there any other apologies, please? No, none in the chamber. None remotely as well. So we'll move on. Can I have declarations of interest? Nothing. Take silence as a no. Great. Moving on. Approval of minutes. You all have read the minutes from the previous meeting. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Absolutely moved, Chair.
Excellent, thank you. And moving on to the main part of the agenda, Welsh Government statutory and non-statutory guidance for principal councils in Wales. Rachel, would you like to go through the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just do a quick reminder to ask all members to turn their cameras on if we can, please, as the Chair has requested. All members remote to turn their cameras on if they can, please. It's more for remote because obviously the Chair can see everyone in the room. Thank you. No, you don't need to because you're in the room, that's fine. So thank you, Chair. Yes, if I can take members to the first item. This is Welsh Government statutory and non-statutory guidance for principal councils in Wales. So as the report states, the purpose today is to present the committee with the Welsh Government's final guidance for principal councils in Wales issued in June this year, with specific reference to how it relates to the work of the Democratic Services Committee. So this is following the Local Government Elections Wales Act 2021, which was passed by Senedd Cymru on the 18th of November 2020, then received royal assent on 20th of January 21. The Welsh Government's stated purpose for the Act, as noted in the explanatory memorandum, is to provide local government with new ways to support and serve their communities and to reinvigorate local democracy in Wales. There's various changes that the Act makes in relation to legislative framework for local government, relating to elections, democracy, performance and governance. In 2021, a report went to Council to highlight the 2021 bill and also demonstrate how the authority was planning on meeting its requirements with a detailed action plan. Following this then, as I said, in June this year, the Welsh Government published their final statutory and non-statutory guidance, which consists of consolidated statutory guidance intended to meet the requirements under the Local Government Act 2000, the Local Government Wales Measure 2011, and the Local Government Elections Wales Act 2021. This guidance is attached to Appendix A. It is considerably long, so I have highlighted in the cover report where there's relevant aspects relating to Democratic Services Committee. So as it states further down in the cover report, Part 2 then, you've got Part 1, which is timing of council meetings, 2, which is training, development and support for local authority members, 3, research support and services for councillors. Part 4 then, you've got arrangements for securing effective overviewing scrutiny, appointment for persons to chair overviewing scrutiny committees, co-opted members of overviewing scrutiny committees, call-in arrangements in relation to overviewing scrutiny committees, councillor calls for action, overview and scrutiny committees, taking into account the views of the public, joint overview and scrutiny committees, democratic services committees, and guidance on multi-location meetings. Those that I've highlighted there, they're relevant to the remit of this committee. If I can just take you to the recommendations then. The purpose of the report today then is recommended that the committee consider and note the relevant sections of the Welsh Government's final statutory guidance issued this year and provide any related comments or suggested items for future consideration on your forward work programme. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Rachel. So looking at the relevant sections of the report, it looks like Part 2. What's the best thing to do is go through each subsection if there's any questions.
That's entirely up to you, Chair, if you want to go through each section or just ask members if they've got in general any comments or anything.
Yeah, I think I'm getting nods of agreement that we should go through each section. So first of all, Part 2. The first section of Part 2 is the timing of council meetings. Already hands are shooting up. Well, not shooting up, one is. I'm going to bring in Councillor Martin Hughes, please, regarding timing of council meetings.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I'll just gather my papers a second. I think, first of all, on a general point, I think I welcome this paper. I think it brings in a lot of legislation and it's quite straightforward, quite thought-provoking. And my sort of initial reaction is how actually up to speed we are as a council on most, if not all, of this, and sometimes ahead the curves. That's really, really good. I think in terms of Section 1, first of all, there's just a couple of comments on that, if I may. The first one is the, I think 1.8, the need for regular breaks. I think the point has been made a number of times that some members have particular health concerns, and we do need to have regular breaks built into our meetings, especially some of the longer ones. And I think also I think that was just the point that I wanted to make on this specific section, Chair. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I'll bring you in now, Councillor Granville. If you'd like to use your hands up thing, that'd be great.
Thank you.
I'll bring you in now. Thanks. Yeah, my initial thoughts were really that we're largely compliant with all this. I mean, we do the surveys. All members had a vote on it, but still, there's still lots to be done. I think you're right, Councillor Hughes, to draw on the length of meetings. Not only is that quite challenging for members who have medical concerns, quite challenging for members who are working full time as well. I do note that our scrutiny meetings are considerably longer than they were in the previous term. That being said, there's lots of stuff to get through, isn't there, really? Lots of, I think we're becoming an increasingly inquisitive council as well, I think it's fair to say. So I'm not sure, I think the only way around that would be for officers to really consider the agenda and perhaps have shorter agendas, really. But I think you're right to raise that point. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Richard Granville now.
Just to support Councillor Hughes, really. I have spoke to you privately before this meeting regarding the issue. I think 4 hours is far too long to just have a 5-minute break. I'm a diabetic, right, and I have to eat before I can take my tablets, and I would suggest that if we're going to do a 4-hour stint, I need at least half an hour to have some food and tablets. I think that's only fair. You know, the committee can carry on if they want to, but I will be taking a half an hour break. In the legal brief that we have today, it says you should be taking breaks, right? So at the end of the day, I'm sure that, you're nodding. So at the end of the day, we'll have to take legal advice on how long we can do it, or as a committee, we can decide. Rachel, how is that going to work? Do we decide as a committee what kind of lengths we have as a committee?
Yes, in terms of this is guidance really. So, you are the Democratic Services Committee, so you can put a recommendation forward. I know that in terms of, from my perspective, me and my team do try and actually encourage breaks after an hour and a half. When we try to kind of, if it's coming towards the end of an item, obviously that might stretch slightly if you're coming to the end of an item, but I think that's what we generally try and keep to, is about an hour and a half, have a short 10-minute break. And then, as you said, if it goes on longer, if it's 3 hours or something, it may be considered that a longer break is needed. But this is, the purpose of this committee is to have this discussion. You are members at the end of the day. You can put that recommendation forward and make comments in terms of what you think should be, the required break periods, etc. So.
I listen to your advice, Chair. I would say let's do the first one, as you said, then, right, a 10-minute break after an hour and a half. Anything after that then should be a half an hour break. But at least then people will have a chance, if they are got something wrong with them, or they need to go to the tea bar or whatever properly, or go and have something to eat. At least you're giving them the opportunity. I know it's stretching the meeting out, but at the end of the day, you have to stop and take a break. And I'd just like to endorse what Councillor Hughes has just said, and I would move that as a recommendation, Chair.
Whoops, I'm going to bring Rachel back in for that one.
Obviously, as I said, you can make these comments and recommendations. It will essentially come down to the chair themselves and maybe the committee themselves, and asking the chair, speaking with the committee and asking that. But it's certainly worthwhile, as I said, this committee making recommendations for suggestions, what they think is appropriate. Thank you.
Personally, I think half hour is a little excessive, but I do recognise that breaks are needed. That's just my opinion. It's just what I think. But I do recognise that certainly breaks are needed. Can I bring in Councillor Walter, please?
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, all. I would support and second the suggestion from Councillor Granville. Really, there shouldn't be any reason for a scrutiny meeting to go beyond 3 hours. I know that many of them do. I think my personal best is 5 hours 20 before a meeting concluded, and there's all kinds of reasons why some of those meetings drag on so long. So I think it's a combination of going through the agenda from with officer support and the chair, and where it looks as though there's going to be potential to go beyond 3 hours, then further meetings should be scheduled, in my view. But I think we have the opportunity here to make a recommendation that meetings should not go beyond 3 hours, and that chairs of the various scrutiny committees should be made aware of that recommendation and asked to try and comply wherever possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Walter. Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, in the previous term, on average, I'm not. This is anecdotal. I haven't, timed all the meetings and done an average or anything like that. But generally speaking, scrutiny meetings were done and dusted in 2 hours in the previous term. I haven't done a 5-hour meeting, but I've done plenty of 4-hour ones, and it's quite exhaustive and challenging if you've got to make that time back up in the workplace. And obviously, I also note Councillor Granville's comments on the medical grounds as well. Excuse me. I think, like I said, and I think you acknowledge this, Councillor Walter, there's lots to discuss, and it's not about diluting the time. It's about breaking it up, and perhaps if additional meetings are needed, so be it. So I would be quite supportive of what you just suggested, providing it doesn't water down scrutiny and questioning and the topics we got to cover. I'm going to bring in Councillor Spiller, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, really, I think I was just going to echo the point that you just made in your last comment, really, that I wouldn't want to see scrutiny watered down. I completely concur with Councillor Walters' point that 5 hours is too much. And I would also support some advice that it should be no more than 3 hours. But of course, you know, there will be occasions when scrutiny meetings will go on longer because items need more in-depth scrutiny. So guidance, yes, but not fixed terms. But I would also support Councillor Granville. You know, I think that there is a need to recognise individual circumstances. You know, and for a 4-hour meeting, for example, there needs to be a reasonable break for people with medical conditions to be able to get some substance and just walk away sometimes from the camera, because these multi-location meetings, I mean, when I'm remote, you know, in any meeting, you lose concentration after a period of time. You need to step away and come back in just to refresh and obviously focus. And that's really crucial for all members, I think.
Thanks for that. Can I bring in Councillor Aspie, please? Mute, I'm afraid. Sean?
Sorry, the microphone was turned off. I do support the fact that these meetings are going on in excess of 3 hours, and we have to take a balanced view, you know, in the fact that the scrutiny committee meeting is an important meeting that should be finished on that particular day. So, I mean, my suggestion would be if this meeting is projected to go in excess of 3 hours, then it's up to the discretion of the chair to authorise a break of up to 30 minutes, depending on what members feel. So if everybody agrees that they want a 15-minute break, then they can have up to 30 minutes, depending on how the members feel.
Sounds pretty sensible to me. Could I bring in Councillor James, please?
Thank you, Chair. You just hit the nail on the head with your opening speech about councillors are more inquisitive now. I mean, the questions, we've never ever had so many questions in council. So if we're going to limit the hours of a council meeting, then we have to limit, I'm afraid, the questioning. I think there's about 30 odd questions in the last meeting. So how are you going to manage that? Do we put limits on questions? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. And I'm going to bring Councillor Spiller back in.
I fully accept that we're more inquisitive, but I would suggest a far better use of time would be to send the mundane reports that we have at the beginning of the meeting, in my opinion, out as email, rather than wasting members and officers' very valuable time by simply going through things that aren't necessary. And hopefully, Councillor James, that will be considered as a recommendation at some point by this committee.
Yeah,
totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, I think you know, I'll make no secret of the fact that I pretty supported that, and I have discussed that with Rachel actually. I'm not sure if we can put that as a recommendation though. Can we really, Rachel?
I've got various views, to be honest, in terms of various options really, that have been expressed here today. So really, I think maybe a combination could be put forward in terms of timing of meetings. If you know, if members are happy to kind of put some type of guidance forward in terms of maybe a, you know, the hour and a half, the 3 hours, obviously down to the chair's discretion. And then in terms of maybe a 20 minutes to half an hour, if it goes beyond 3 hours. As I said, make a note that, as I said, sometimes there is the need to go beyond, so maybe that extra long break is needed. So I think there's varying views. So in terms of recommendation, you would have to maybe agree. I would suggest and advise maybe a combination of that in the recommendation if members are agreed.
Yeah, great. I was also referring to Councillor Spiller's point about the full council, the initial statements from cabinet members. Is that something that we can look into really as well, or?
In relation to that, I think my suggestion, I think Councillor Thomas, you did raise this with me, and I think it has been emailed. And I think my suggestion is that it possibly be discussed by group leaders and considered there, because obviously it would be a decision that then would be put forward by them if needed. So that's where I put it at the moment. And actually, the agenda is due to go out, so I can always get that on the group leaders' next agenda, if you would like me to.
Yes, please. Yes. Yes, please. That'd be very helpful. I'll bring in Councillor Harrison as well. And Councillor Spiller.
Going to full council meetings where, you know, we normally start at 4 p.m. We've seen quite a lot of members who, for some reason or other, which I think is good, that they like to attend in person in the chamber. We have a long meeting, and then all of a sudden we get a mass exodus of councillors that have to go and move their cars. Otherwise, it gets eaten by the car park. It's just something that to think of. That might be out of our remit, but this locking of the car park at that early in the evening, especially when the meetings are going on, especially when they go on longer, we lose a certain percentage of councillors because they have to go move their cars, and that interrupts the meeting as well. Thank you, Chair.
No, it's a good point, actually. Precisely why I don't use the car park. But yeah, moving on from that, I'll bring Councillor Spiller in.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed the nodding heads to the point that I raised, and I thank Councillor James for his contribution as well. But I do wonder whether actually, you know, I appreciate group leaders have to make the decision on that, or perhaps it should go to them. But is there any agreement within this committee that perhaps there's a recommendation from this committee to be able to do that?
Yeah, I think.
If I can just come in, I did check this with Kelly, as I said, following Councillor Thomas's query over it, and it's not technically within the remit of this committee. That's the thing. So that's why I've suggested maybe going to group leaders with that and seeing what the outcome of that is. Thank you.
Great, thanks for the clarification there. I think we'll bring in Councillor James, and then we'll
Final question, Chair.
Clarity on the
recommendation. Do you think we should limit the amount of time that guest speakers get? I say this with a certain housing association came, and they were there for almost 3/4 of an hour. I think we should limit the time that companies who come in and who speak as in barrister courts. I think we should limit their time. That's one thing we could look at, surely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor James. Rachel wants to come in on that one.
Sorry, Councillor James, can I just clarify? You want about in terms of scrutiny presentations to or full council presentations?
Yeah, full council presentations, Rachel, yeah.
So
I think some of them go on too long.
Yes, as I said, I mean, in terms of the presentations that you have from partner agencies, we do try and set a time limit on that, to be fair, and we do tell them 10 to 20 minutes or 10 to 20 minutes then for questions, etc. And we do try to set a limit on that one. In terms of presentations then for full council to do with reports, as I said, I can always, we can always make that forward as a comment again and suggest it because, it is within members' remit, but I will have to take that forward and see. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, Chair, but I don't know if members remember, but once upon a time it was 2 o'clock start for people who came, who wanted, like the police, all right? And any charities who want to come. It's 2 o'clock. It was up to people then whether they want to attend or not. But now we're including them in our meetings. So that has made the meetings longer.
So that's a great point.
It was up to people then, councillors, whether they want to attend this certain thing, whether they have no interest in this thing. As I know perhaps some of us haven't. But then that used to work well. And then we had a break before the council meeting. Thank you, Chair.
That's a great point, and I remember it well. I wonder if it clashes with group meetings, and that is perhaps the challenge. But I don't know. I mean, maybe bring back group meetings. I don't know. But again, I think that's probably one for group leaders, probably, isn't it, Rachel? I think.
Yes, I think so. I mean, as you say, it was actually. It used to be, as you're right, Councillor James, it used to be that it was before the council meeting, as I said, before it started, it would be at 2 o'clock was the council presentation from a partner agency, and then 3 o'clock council would start. I think it was brought into the agenda simply because, as I said, maybe there wasn't a very good turnout for that presentation from partner organisation, and sometimes those updates where maybe members might think, they're not necessarily relevant, that members maybe, there might be stuff in them that members do need to be informed about. But I agree in terms of making sure we do keep to the limit on those. And I can always take that forward with the Mayor. And, we can try and highlight that with Kelly and the Mayor to try and make sure that external partner organisations keep to the time limit that we do give them. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Granville, I think this will be the last point on this little section.
Just to make a point here,
Yeah.
Chair, you know, Councillor Roberts has just said about having that in front of full council. I will totally agree with him. But we've been half an hour on a simple item here, right? Just discussing it. How time just goes away from you, right? And then you can understand why scrutiny goes on for 5 hours.
Absolutely. That's why I wanted to make sure you were the last to speak on this bit. So I think we're clear on the recommendation there, Rachel, yeah?
Yes, as I said, I'll take the comments forward certainly, and I can pick up those in the various aspects, as I said, with group leaders, etc. And as I said, if members are happy with a recommendation in relation to the breaks that I said, it's a bit of a combination really, so I can just clarify that. We're suggesting every an hour and a half there's a 10-minute break, and then if it goes beyond 3 hours, that a break of 20 minutes to half an hour is proposed, but that we really do try and get chairs to stick to 3-hour meetings and try to stick to the timing on the agenda. Yep. Is everyone happy with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Sounds good. Seeing lots of nodding heads. So let's move on. Still on part 2. The next section of part 2 of section 2 is looking at training, development and support for members. Reading the report, I felt that we were largely already quite compliant on this with a lot of the training that is provided. The only thing I would comment on is opportunities for other types of training, not necessarily listed in the guidance. More soft skill training, so things like dealing with the media, that sort of thing. I don't know if that is something that we could investigate. Presentation skills, that sort of thing. And also, I'm wondering, recalling back to the first induction period when we were all, when we became councillors, that was quite a challenging time. I think there was lots of training at once, and you might expect that as part of an induction period, but with everyone with various commitments, I wondered if we could perhaps look at the accessibility of training and whether the delivery of it is appropriate, the timings, and that sort of thing. Really, if members can access that training. That's the only thing I've got. So I'm going to bring in Councillor Hughes as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just got 2 comments on this section. The first one is the introduction of annual interviews for training and development, where the suggestion is that that's undertaken by professional staff from Human Resources Directorate. I think the thing to flag up there is there is going to be a resource issue, definitely. And I also wonder how members would respond to that. Would they feel that they are being sort of held to account by an officer? But there's sort of a number of things there. But I think group leaders do have a role to play, and they fulfil that in meeting their group members on a regular basis. So just put that out there. I think the other issue then, Chair, is about the protection of councillors' addresses and their right for privacy, of course, which we have to respect. But there's another side to that, isn't it? It's our availability to members of the public. I think as far as withholding an address, I don't think there's much that we can do about it because it's in legislation and it's up to the particular member. But what I've noticed on the cursory check of the council website is not every councillor's telephone number is featured there. And I just sort of pose that question, really. I don't think that there should be any obstacle to members of the public being able to pick up the phone to text or to speak directly to their councillor. And, even if they choose to use a mobile phone dedicated for the purpose of councillors' calls, I think these days it's quite a straightforward thing to offer. I just ask other members how they feel about that, because I think as far as I'm concerned, I would at least expect my councillor to have a published phone number that I could contact them directly. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with that. My phone number's on there. I'm not sure if we can mandate that, though, really. Can we? Really?
We can't mandate it. No, it is allowed that members are allowed to take their number off, and actually it relates to one of the items on the agenda today regarding personal safety. And I know that is one of the issues that members have had nuisance calls in the past, hence the reason why some of them have requested their address be removed and their phone number. We did used to have an office number on there for some members, and I know, for example, I had a call come through to me actually just this week because they couldn't get hold of their own ward member. So it came through to Democratic Services, and I've been able to get in touch with the relevant members, and that has been with the residents' contact details, and they've now contacted the resident. So we could look at that as an option again and put one of our Democratic Services teams' telephone numbers on there, the office number, and then maybe that way we can pass the messages on to the councillors, because I do appreciate sometimes, you know, it either requires a member to turn their mobile phone off every night, etc., or to have a separate mobile phone, which I know some members have. The other option, of course, is you could always look, if you are a town and community council member, you could always ask to put your clerk's number on, if again that's not a personal number, because you wouldn't want them having nuisance phone calls either. But if they have an office that's open certain times of the week, you could ask that number be used potentially. So there are various options if members wanted to put different numbers on there, and I can certainly explore those if members want to contact me individually over that. But as I said, it is up to members whether they have those removed. Again, we could put the 643 number on, you know, and in terms of then, you know, maybe that we could go through customer services, and I can speak to maybe customer services and see whether they would be willing to, you know, take those messages maybe and pass them on again to the relevant individual members, or likewise pass them on to myself and Democratic Services. So there's various options we can look at for that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Councillor Hughes, is that a legacy hand? I assume it is. Yeah, no worries. Councillor Granville, please.
Just to say, Chair, Councillor Hughes just mentioned about addresses, and 2.32, it says the Welsh Government considers the protection of members' addresses should be a priority for councils to support their member well-being and to promote diversity amongst membership. So basically they're saying there that if you want to take it off, you can, and I had to take it off, and I spoke to Rachel regarding a personal issue I had with one of my constituents, right, which was getting out of hand. But we'll come to that when we deal with the issue, as Rachel said.
Councillor Spiller, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just picking up on something Rachel said, I think I was one of the councillors actually concerned in the email that Rachel sent out. I don't ever recollect asking for my phone number not to be put on the website. And funnily enough, as Rachel was speaking and Martin was speaking, I popped across to have a little look, and I was quite surprised to see my phone number not on there, because it's all over my Facebook page. And to be perfectly honest, you know, if I was that precious, I wouldn't have put it on there. So I'm just a bit curious as to how it was deemed that the members' phone numbers didn't go up there. Have I missed something? Because you know, I'm a bit unsure as to why mine isn't there.
Bring Rachel in for that one.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not too sure, to be honest, Councillor Spiller. We only take them down at the request of members, to be honest. So it may have been something possibly in the induction. Maybe you ticked the box for asking it not to be shared. It could have been an accident from my team themselves. So if you're happy for that to go up, I'm happy to put those back up. No problem at all.
Thank you, Rachel. Can I come back, Chair?
Yeah, sure.
I would certainly be keen to on a personal level, just to understand how that happened, and whether that was me ticking a box. But likewise, there may be other members that don't realise that their contact details aren't on there as well, that want to be a bit more accessible. I share Councillor Granville's point. I wouldn't particularly want my address on the BCBC website. Not that it makes any difference. Most people come to my door if they want to speak to me, because they know where I am. But you know, but from the point of view of telephone numbers, I would certainly be very interested to understand why that's not there.
Great. And I said my phone number's on there. I've assumed that. I mean, I don't tend to go on my own councillor's page, but I'll have a check for myself now, actually. Yeah. So I think what I'm getting, the flavour I'm getting there really is down to discretion of members, I think. Is that fair to say, really, of what information they hold? And that's pretty much what we're doing, really. Would perhaps one recommendation would be perhaps that members should have a little check at their page and check that they're happy with what's there, really, as a review.
Could
yeah.
I just go a step forward, Chair, with your permission? Perhaps if we just send out a simple survey form to members and they can fill it in, and that'll be done and dusted then for the rest of the term, won't it?
Great, do that. And my point about the survey about accessibility of training as well, is that generally agreed as well? It's not really contentious, is it? Yeah.
Can I just take any views on that, actually, in terms of members' views? Because obviously, in terms of member development, this is exactly the remit of your committee. So in terms of member development, are there any views in terms of accessibility, in terms of the methods that are provided, etc.? Because I can certainly take those on board and see it at reviewing it slightly. So I'd welcome any views on that.
Is that a view? Councillor Hughes? Oh, loads of views. Right, what I say is we've got 4 hands now, and we're still on the second point. Can you make your points quite quick as well, please? Right, good. Great, there's one down. Councillor Aspie, please.
Yeah, my recommendation or my personal view is the form is the correct way to go. Do you want your address displayed? Tick. Do you want your personal number displayed? Tick. Do you want your mobile number displayed? Tick. And that should be done, in my opinion, on an annual basis because circumstances do change.
Great, good point. Councillor Walter, please.
Yeah, thanks. As brief as I can, I have spoken to Rachel about this, but the online self-development portal facility I found particularly tricky to use, and I like to think I know my way around most devices. With some of our more senior, I mean that by age, not length of service, members might be struggling even more, and so I wonder if there wouldn't be an opportunity twice a year perhaps to have some form of in person, or even doing the stuff online but with an officer present to help guide some of us through. It's just a suggestion. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Rachel wants to come in on that one.
I think that's a really good suggestion, Councillor Walter, and I will take that forward. And I also am looking at reviewing the L&D page for members, the learning development page. It's a project that I've got on my list for my staff to take on, and hopefully I'm hoping the apprentice can assist with this, our new apprentice, Oscar, and we're hoping to take that forward within the next 12 months and really get that revamped and redone. This is, I will say, stress, staffing resources in my team at the moment are being affected, so I will do my best to get that resolved, but I will certainly take that option on board because I think that would be really good to offer out to members. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, great. Councillor Granville?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just suggest, as a committee, look, we all go through our training, right? And I would suggest, perhaps, Rachel, what you need to do is ask members individually what training they, if you're going to send out a performer, right, send it and ask each individual what they want to do. You know what I mean? It's nice that you put in on training, but sometimes I don't find it's an advantage to me to do something that I'm not interested in. I'm interested in planning, rights of way, and all that side of it, which officers do train me in-house as well on planning issues, right? So, if there's something comes up with planning, new laws come in, I get briefed on it. Not every member gets briefed, Chair, but that's all I'm saying to you is you pick what you want to do. You can't cover everything in the council. It's impossible, right? Unless you're a really brain box and you can take it all in, you know what I mean? But you can need subjects so you got concentrate and you specialise in, right? And that's my point, Chair.
Great, good point. So some sort of survey, ticking boxes of various topics, I think, and maybe an open box as well. And I appreciate all sorts could come in that, but then, it's open to debate then, isn't it, really? So let's move on. The last part of part 2 looks at research support. Now, the way I read it, I thought this was largely for cabinet members, the way I read it. But yeah, I'm going to bring Rachel in.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to touch on this one quickly and maybe, suggest that we don't go into this one in detail because it's actually in our forward work programme. There is a proposal that research support in the guidance is provided to all members, so research support. So obviously you can understand and appreciate that, this is particularly for us going to be a difficult thing, and it's difficult for any local authority really to navigate. but particularly given staff and resources. So it is on a forward work programme for the future meeting because we have had a suggested protocol provided to us from the WLGA. So I'm going to present that to the committee in future and we can discuss. And it's looking at parts that we can take on board from the WLGA and parts that we can't, as I said, due to staff and resources. You've got some local authorities who have dedicated research officers. Unfortunately, we don't in my team. But as I said, it's also looking at what we also do have out there, for example, already. We do have things that maybe, comms could quickly email out to yourselves or to me to share with members. And I'm trying to do that more and more anyway. But I think it is for us majorly looking at what resources we already have, what is going on already, and how can we quickly communicate that over to members to get that information out to you without, as I said, providing, undue pressure on the team to provide that research support. Obviously, in terms of a scrutiny member, you have the scrutiny officers and they are also to undertake research and analysis on the committee's behalf. But as I said, in terms of dedicated resource for research, we don't necessarily have this all the time. And we don't have access to this. So we've just had to look at it in future within our constraints. Thank you.
Yeah, generally pretty supportive of research. But you've got to weigh up the resources and financial resources as well, really. So haven't really got any hands up for this one. So I think we should move on now, and that would be moving on to part 4. Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah. All happy with that? To agree?
Sorry, Chair, can I just formally move that we agree with Rachel in what she's saying with resources and everything else? It's going to be far too much stress, just to put the record straight on each point.
Yeah, everyone happy with that? Nodding, yeah, that'll do. Right, so moving on to part 4. So there's a couple of sections in this. Arrangements for secure and effective overview and scrutiny. Appointment of persons to chair overview and scrutiny committees, co-opted members of overview and scrutiny committees, the call-in procedure, call-in arrangements in relation to overview and scrutiny committees, councillor calls for action, overview and scrutiny committees, taking into account the view. Overview and scrutiny committees taking into view the public's opinions, joint overview and scrutiny committees, and democratic service committees, and finally guidance on multi-location meetings. So I think rather than going through each point, I think we better take it all holistically, those part 4 together. Does anyone have any comments they want to raise on part 4, please? Councillor Hughes.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Granville's laughing at me, so I don't know why that's the case. I think there's do you want to take them point by point, Chair, or so the
yeah,
first
go on.
one?
Yes, fine. Yeah.
The first one's on 6.9. Just an observation that it states the scrutiny chair should have good working relationships with chair of governance and audit and standing committees. But I think in practice, I don't think those chairs actually meet. I don't think all scrutiny chairs are members of G&A, for example. They're probably unaware of Gareth Chapman, who is an independent member who chairs the G&A. So maybe that's something that we can look at to see if we can just facilitate that communication. So that was the first point. Chair, do you want me to move on to the second one? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, just go ahead.
The next one then was about the guidance about how to support scrutiny vice chairs down to the local authority. Is this missing from our constitution? So if I just refresh myself on that one. So it's scrutiny vice, how to appoint scrutiny vice chairs. So we don't have any mention of that in our constitution, and I think it's something that's been a bit ad hoc. So again, that's something perhaps to flag up for the future. So my apologies for not being able to read my own writing. And the third one then is the, maybe there is under Section 8 a strong case for co-opting members onto scrutiny committees, including COSH. I think there are significant strengths in bringing in expertise from outside. Governance and audit, I think, is a particularly good example of that. And I'd like to see something being developed as far as that's concerned. Thanks.
Great, thanks for that. Out of the whole of part 4, I've only really got 2 comments. The first one is taking into account the views of the public. I think, and Bridgend's no stranger to this. I mean, I think this is a UK-wide problem, really. I think the public's knowledge and perception of local government is generally quite weak, especially the scrutiny process is probably non-existent, in fact, largely. So, and it's an important part of our democratic function. So I think some more work could be done on this, bringing in the views of the public. So there needs to be more awareness raising of our democratic function for the public. So I was going to suggest some sort of small guide or something like that, or maybe people don't really read guides, maybe videos or something like that on YouTube. I don't know, but perhaps some sort of investigation into that, because the public are largely completely oblivious. For example, they're entitled to ask questions at full council. That's one area that I think, I think if people knew that, they would probably ask a question as well. Rachel wanted to come in on that point I just made, so I'll bring her in now.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, just a few quick responses in relation to Councillor Hughes's proposals as well. So in terms of public knowledge and participation, just to let you know, there is a public participation strategy that is due to go out for consultation very, very shortly. It is due to go to scrutiny. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, we can get it to scrutiny, COSC in December. And also, I think it is going to the Town and Community Council Forum also for consideration, to encourage basically town and community councils to then share it with their own town and community councils to get their views as part of the consultation process. So that is good, and there's a lot of we've had a lot of input into this. It's been drafted by the communications team, but we've had a lot of input into this in terms of democratic services and scrutiny particularly. So obviously, it's things we will be looking at to progress in. Again, unfortunately, though, I do come down to resources, but we are looking at doing various things, seeing what we can do with the resources we have. Co-opted members aspect, actually, I've got a scrutiny review paper that I've drafted that should be coming to the scrutiny chairs shortly, and then we'll see if it comes to council then following that. But one of the suggestions, for example, on that I'm putting forward is that there's a youth council member co-opted onto all scrutiny committees. So that's possibly for consideration going forward. So that's starting that process of getting the co-opted members involved, because I think that young person's voice is definitely missing from scrutiny there. We have had them as invitees in the past, but I think it's about co-opting them on maybe to all scrutiny committees to give that view. And then in terms of supporting the scrutiny in terms of support for scrutiny for the vice chairs, can I just clarify if members wish to make that maybe as a recommendation for future consideration? Are members happy to consider that for future, and I can put that forward and see if I can raise that with Kelly and see.
Just to clarify there, Rachel, are you asking if this committee can look at the public engagement strategy? Is that what you're trying to get at there?
We can double check if needs be. I can double check if it fits within the consultation period. As I said, it's not open as yet, and it's only open for 12 weeks. And I don't think we have our next meeting until February. But I will certainly have a look if it can come before this committee, whether it fits within the remit, etc. There are aspects that do, because it's democratic services support in there. But as I said, if not, I will certainly send it out to you all, and please encourage you to participate in the consultation of it and provide any views that way. Thank you.
I'll bring in Councillor Walter, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just going back to Section 8, the co-option of members to overview and scrutiny committees. I must admit, I hadn't realised that this was something that we could potentially do. And it strikes me, as a member of 2 scrutiny committees plus this one, that there would be some merit in considering, I don't know what the process would be, it might be open recruitment, but trying to bring somebody with expertise in the field of education, social services and so on onto the main scrutiny committees. As a member of the Standards Committee, most members are actually independent members, they're not councillors as such, and I think that helps us have a more wider and broader input into deliberations there. So you know, it's a suggestion that maybe that's something we could think about, and we use an open recruitment process and set out the sorts of skills, background, knowledge, and experience that we'll be looking for to add value to SOC 1, 2, and 3 in particular. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, great. That sounds good to me. I mean, obviously, Rachel said about youth participation. We already have, you know, like the primary school rep and I think some of the voluntary aided schools as well, secondary school as well. So to some extent we do that, but what I assume you're proposing is to widen that to further subject areas. So, for example, a doctor on a health scrutiny or something like that. You know, that's just one silly example, but yeah.
Yeah, no, education professional, a socials work and a social care professional, and so on. Yes, I think that might well add value. Thanks.
Great. Well, I think that's pretty good. Is everyone fairly happy with that as a recommendation? I'm seeing lots of nodding heads, so if we could include that, yeah, great. Councillor Granville, please.
I was just going to say, Chair, I'd like to put a caveat to that, right, that they don't come from local authorities, right? They have to be independent, right, in their own right.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, that's good. I don't see any more questions. The only question I had really was on with regards to the call-in procedure. There's nothing in the guidance about having caps on the number of call-ins. I'm just wondering, you know, if there's could be any investigation why we have a cap on the call-in. I mean, surely it should be just a matter of. I take the point there could be to resolve, you know, vexatious call-ins, that sort of thing. But you know, if that number of decisions needs to be called in, so be it really, and that there are adequate safeguards to make it, you know, to make it possible to call in a decision, but also to put, well, for the person to make the call in to have to put some sort of effort in. Just wonder if anyone had any comments on that. Councillor Walters, your question in relation to that or something else? And you're on mute, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, it's on that line. I mean, I think the guidance that's set out allows councils to set their own rules, with the proviso on 9.5 that rules should not be designed to make them almost impossible. I think the current situation where I think from memory the Constitution allows for 6 per year, I think is a fair balance. Otherwise, you know, one might well find that it just becomes a regular thing to challenge every decision. So I think the opportunity, and Rachel will know better than me, but I think this basically reinforces what we as a council currently do under our current constitution. I may be wrong.
I'll bring Councillor Spiller in as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's fair to say that regardless of where you sit on the council, that the next 12 months are certainly going to be very interesting in terms of budget setting and priorities. And whilst I can understand Councillor Walters' point that 6 should be enough, I do wonder in my own mind whether it does curb scrutiny of cabinet decisions and whether that should be increased, because, you know, in my mind, if there's a need to call something in, we're there to really scrutinise that decision and act for our constituents. And I can't fathom how you can have an arbitrary figure of 6. It just doesn't seem right, and it does seem to be curbing the democratic process, in my view.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, when somebody calls in a decision, they're weighing up. When you've got a cap, you think, oh, you know, is this the best use of what we've got, really? And that influences your decision, I think, really. I wonder, Rachel, could we do some sort of investigation of what other councils do and then perhaps make a recommendation based on that. Would that be a good idea?
I can certainly look at other local authorities, yes. I think the cap was brought in a number of years ago. I was actually in scrutiny when the cap was proposed in the Constitution and was agreed. And I think it was, to stop such frequent, I think, to really sort, because if I can explain in terms of a call-in, it should be a last resort. It should be where, everything else is, technically you should be looking at pre-decision rather than the call-in as the preferred method. Call-in should be the last resort. And we really hope to never get to that stage, to be honest. So I think it was really to kind of, at the time, it was to stop so many call-ins, to maybe almost, make members think, do we really need to call in this decision, or, and what is the outcome going to be? Are we actually going to have an outcome? But I can certainly see what other local authorities do, and I can bring that back in future. But obviously, you have to bear in mind this will be a recommendation to council to change the constitution again. I'd have to raise it with the monitoring officer, etc., and we'd have to explore it that way. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Just to be clear then, because I respect the fact that some members thought that the current procedures were adequate. Is this something we're going to look at another time then? You're going to go off and do a little bit of research and then bring it back to us or something like that?
Yes, I can. I can go and see what other local authorities do, and I can do a bit of research there and bring it back. Thank you.
Great, that sounds fair to me, if everyone's happy with that. And obviously we can have another discussion on that. I haven't got any more questions, so I think we can move on from this one now. And the next agenda item is Welsh Local Government Association and Councillor Support Self-Evaluation Framework. Rachel, would you like to do the report for this?
Yep, 1 second, let me get on to that one. Thank you. So if I can take you then to item agenda 5, page number I can't actually find at the moment. 173. Yeah, thank you. So the purpose of this report then is to present the Welsh Local Government Association's draft Councillor Support Self-Evaluation Framework and provide an opportunity for the committee to provide feedback to the WLGA on the framework as part of their consultation process. So basically, it's a bit of a background. There used to be a council charter that WLGA set up, and there was an award if councils wanted to put themselves forward for the charter relating to support for councillors. So you had to meet a set criteria, and then you could apply for an award. I think a few years ago, I'm trying to think when it was really, Bridgend did achieve the charter. The heads of democratic services have met with WLGA. They've revised this charter, and they've decided to do, instead of a charter with an award, I think they've decided to look at a self-evaluation framework instead, to look at council support. So as it states at 2.3, this following heads of democratic services meetings from across Wales. So this now is quite drastically different now, because it's looking at post-COVID pandemic and resources now being ever challenging, as we've said. So this is a new voluntary self-evaluation framework for councils that's been developed, modernising and replacing the former Wales Charter. So it's attached to Appendix A. As I said, we've discussed it in our HODS meetings. It's out for members to provide comment on to the WLGA to see if they want to tweak it. Again, I take to the recommendation to provide any comment or suggestions to be subsequently fed back, but I will highlight it obviously is recognising local priorities and local needs. And again, I'd say about resources at the current time. So whilst there's lots of stuff in there that we would love to do and increase resources purposes, we aren't necessarily able to. But that doesn't mean that it's not something to target and to strive towards. And that was my view when I discussed this as a head of democratic services with my peers, was that I think, I always thought the charter was quite good, because even if you didn't put yourself forward, you could always go to other local authorities who had achieved the charter for best practice. But I think that's still where we can do this in the heads of democratic services meetings. I can share with my fellow colleagues and find out where maybe some local authorities have done really well in particular areas of this framework, and I can maybe look to share best practice across that and bring that forward to yourselves and to this council. But really, it's just seeking your views on this and to feedback to WLGA. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. I think I'd certainly benefit from a little bit of research and best practice from other local authorities. There's quite a bit on diversity, so I'm wondering if there's a role here for our equalities committee. I don't recall us doing a diversity declaration or indeed that being agreed by full council. So We have we?
We have got one, I believe, yes. I have seen something that went to council a number of years ago. Not too many years ago, I think it was pre-pandemic. So I do think we have one of those.
And how often should that be done then? Once a term or something like that, is it? Or
I can explore that really.
Yeah.
I'll see what the actual outcome of that report was, and I can explore that certainly and
Great.
Update you on that.
That's all for me, really. I got one question from Councillor Granville.
Thank you, Chair. Just to ask the officer, I know that we have put reports out in English, obviously. Do we also put Welsh reports out as well as bilingual for people that can't speak Welsh, that want to read in Welsh and see our reports in Welsh? I know it's a cost element to that, but just going on the legislation, do we do that? That's the first question. And secondly, Chair, I think it would be interesting for all members to read the Future Generations Act, right? As Councillor Hughes and I have read it, we've got copies of it. I don't know if members have actually read it and got copies, hard copies of it, but it's a good document to read because it tells you things of what the Welsh Government are trying to achieve. And if you haven't read it, I suggest you do read it because it's implementing now, it's coming in, right? Because as you're going through it, so I would suggest, Chair, that we have, as a council, that should be sent out to all members.
Yeah, bring Rachel in for that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so in terms of reports, under the Welsh language standards, which were put forward, Bridgend doesn't have to provide all reports in Welsh. We translate all agendas, we translate all minutes or decision records going forward, but we don't translate any necessarily reports that go to committees. If there is a report, for example, that is published online, such as the corporate plan, for example, and they're there for public to view, that is translated into Welsh. So the major reports that do get published on our website are translated into Welsh for the Welsh side of the page. But for committee meetings, as I said, it's just agendas and minutes/decision records. I'll take that forward in terms of the Act, and I can share that with all members, not a problem. And in terms of the diversity, I've just found the diversity declaration actually went to council in 2021, July 2021, so I can share that then with all members again, obviously because we've had an election since that time. I'm happy to do that. And if members wish to revisit that as part of this committee and discuss that in any way, we can certainly take that forward. Thank you.
Great. So to be clear then, Rachel could do a little bit of best practice research on that, and we'll have a little look at that at a later date. So no more questions, so moving on. We've touched on this already. Elected member personal safety protocol. So again, Rachel, do you want to go through this one, please?
Yep, no problem. Let me just locate that one. Just trying to go back and forth on my computer. Thank you. So if I can take you to the elected member personal safety protocol report. So as it states, the purpose of this report is to present a draft elected member personal safety protocol to the committee to comment and provide any proposed amendments to recommend to council that the authority then is delegated to the monitoring officer and the chief finance officer to consider and determine any requests for funding, appropriate security measures where a member is at personal risk or significant harm. So if I can explain, the background to this report really is following the Welsh Government elections, the WLGA and along with Data Cymru published a report detailing the result from exit surveys of councillors, and you'll see some of the information there if you've had a chance to look at it. But it does say some of the reasons in terms of members and leaving local authorities was down to online abuse, harassment, bullying, intimidation, etc. So unfortunately, social media was obviously given as one of those options. Also in relation to this, we've used that as a bit of background, and unfortunately, as many members will be aware, some of our own members have recently experienced some incidents on social media and at their homes. So this is in response to that, really. So what we've decided, I've worked alongside health and safety officers, and we've looked at various other personal safety advice and legislation from the WLGA, from the Local Government Information Unit, and we've tried to produce some type of protocol for members going forward, which is proposed at Appendix A. As well as providing useful steps and guidance for elected members to follow, the protocol gives a generic risk assessment for elected members' activities. So that's really for elected members to keep for themselves and to almost do a risk assessment themselves on their own activities and consider how the risks that are related to activities can be reduced. for your continued safety. It also references the authority's lone working guidance, and whilst I know that's created for staff, it is relevant if you find yourselves in surgeries on your own, for example, or in any other lone working instance. You can have a look at that, and that might provide some good information for you. It is said to be read in conjunction with the protocol in order to reduce the risk. So obviously the lone working risk assessment, you would look, and guidance, you'd look alongside our protocol because it does mention surgeries, etc. The protocol also references social media and online guidance for elected members, which provides information including setting up social media accounts, using social media effectively and safely, and dealing with difficult posts and complaints, and a way to keep you and others safe. There's also a lot of links provided which for further information, and we really, I would really encourage members to have a look at all that advice. It was no point in terms of reiterating everything into our own protocol, but I would really encourage members to look further than our own protocol and look at that other advice that is out there. 3.7 as well then, the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales has stated that the authority must support the work of its elected members and statutory cooperative members to enable them to carry out their duties, and to support this, the Council provides access to email, phone, data, ICT. But the authority must also support the safety of councillors as outlined in the IRPW Annual Report 2021, and it's stated there in terms of that. Therefore, as the recommendation said, the protocol is provided to you today for suggested comments, but we're also asking the committee to recommend to council that authority is given to the monitoring officer and chief finance officer to consider those instances for funding where appropriate security measures are needed for members who are considered at significant risk or harm. Obviously, this would be a case-by-case basis, as the financial implications can state, and this would have to be found within existing democratic services budgets, and as I said, would be considered by the monitoring officer. I think that's everything. Thank you, Chair. Any comments?
I think this is a good piece of work. It's very interesting and relate to some of it, unfortunately. I thought it was quite interesting, the bit about dealing with emotional constituents, and I think that's particularly challenging. I mean, there's comments here about dealing with if a constituent made a racist remark, and that, unfortunately, I have heard racist and homophobic comments, and that is really challenging for us, I imagine, as members to challenge such comments. But that's an interesting comment there. In addition to that, I don't see anything in this document about dealing with constituents who might potentially have mental health problems. So I wonder if that could be considered. I have been in situations where I'm not a clinician or anything like that, but I've suspected that the constituent's mental health has been severely compromised, and what to do if you find yourself in that situation. But otherwise, I think this is really quite useful, and I'll certainly revisit this again. Councillor Granville wishes to make
Chair,
comments.
can I thank you for that. And what you've just said, I'll just go on a little bit from. I think as well we need to put on there about people that are homeless, living rough, that come to see you as well. You've got to be so careful. And I'm going to give an highlight to what happened to me a month ago. That's why, Councillor Spur, that I've taken my personal address off the council website due to this situation that I was in. My telephone number and email address is there, but I'm going to give you an instance. I was dealing with a case in Canelli with a homeless person, done a member referral, done everything I should have. My daughter was in the house on her own, and this particular gentleman went down my street. I was having some jobs done to my house. That night he phoned me and said to me, "Oh, I seen you outside your house working." And I was in the council chamber doing work, right? I was in a meeting. And that really frightened me, that my daughter could be challenged at the door by this gentleman because he was unstable, he's homeless, right? And it was a very difficult decision I had to make. And that's how things can just be blown out of all proportion. So I'd just like to put that on the table, just to make members aware how things can just happen when you think you're trying to help people. I do agree with this, Chair, and I started my own surgeries. There are going to be 2 of us in a surgery. I've taken cognizance of exactly what they said in here for safety reasons. It's in a community centre. It's well lit. I can get out if it's an emergency, because I was also considering what happened to the 2 MPs that got stabbed on their own. So it does happen. So you've got to look at things at all aspects. But I just wanted to tell the committee exactly why I took mine off the address.
Great, that's quite useful, the homelessness comment. Extending on my comment about mental health, and you actually made me think, actually, I mean, that there are, in my ward, there are certain households where I am aware of the fact that they have drug and alcohol misuse problems as well. So probably, some guidance on how members should deal with constituents with those problems as well. You made a good point about lone working with surgeries. I used to have surgeries. And yeah, I used to do them on my own. Now, a lot of the single member wards have been reduced. I know there are some single member wards remaining, but now mine's a multi-member. I think if I did reintroduce my surgeries, I think I'd do it with a fellow ward member. But yeah, good points, and I'll bring in Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. It's just to bring the whole thing into context, isn't it? I think we're all aware that if you like, the salad days of local authorities are over. We're not developing, we're not carrying out the work that we would love to do. And the briefing yesterday just gave an indication of the pressures that we face in the next few years. And there will be some difficult decisions, and they will have an impact on our communities. So I think we're certainly preparing ourselves for any reaction in terms of just making sure that our safety is safeguarded. That's particularly important. So the timing is absolutely spot on. I'd also, there's also some really good advice here, as you say, Chair, and I just sort of, highlight the difficulties sometimes of when you're faced in a one-to-one situation. Where sometimes that statements can be taken, misinterpreted or whatever. And I've come across a couple of cases with colleagues where some conversations that have taken place, because there aren't any third parties there or any witnesses, have resulted in, quite difficult situations. So it's all good stuff, and I certainly encourage everyone to take on board the guidance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks for that, Councillor Hughes. Don't have any more questions. We've got a couple of recommendations there, haven't we, I think?
I've got the one. And any further comments or anything else that may be missed?
Oh, got Councillor James in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, when we're dealing with people with mental health and drug issues, I really think that it's all you can do. All right, you're not a professional in that, is to advise people, point them in the right direction as where to go. There's enough adverts on the television, okay, telling people if they got this problem, and mental health is a big, big problem. So all as us as councillors can do is to point the people in the right direction. As you just said, you've got to be careful what you say. So that's all I think you should be able to do. And that's, you've done your bit in helping them. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. That's great. All good on this one?
If there's no further comments.
There's no further comments. So I'm going to move on to the multi-location meetings policy review as well. Rachel again, so would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I can take you then to item number 7. This is a multi-location meetings policy review. Members will recall this came to the committee when it was first published, following the change then after the COVID pandemic to have hybrid meetings. So it's been slightly amended. So the purpose really of the report is to provide you with the proposed amendments to the multi-location meetings policy as part of a policy review prior to then its submission to full council for approval. So it refers back in the background to section 4 of the Local Government Wales measure, which makes provision for remote meetings. And as I said, where it came from out of the pandemic, as I've mentioned, and then under the Local Government Elections Wales Act, which you've already seen in the guidance in item 4, it makes for formal meetings where participants may all be in the same physical place. So the meeting arrangements that comprise the rules and procedures adopted by the local authority in accordance with the statutory requirements and should be reflected in the Council's constitution. So, as I said, in June 2022, a multi-locations meeting policy was approved by Council that took account of interim statutory guidance by Welsh Government. So some of the changes, for example, have been made with the removal of the COVID pandemic adjustments that we put in the policy initially. So we've also requested that all participants of meetings to keep cameras on, and as we've already said, we're piloting that at the moment in meetings. Clarification then on the Chair's responsibility for any voting process during multi-locations meetings has been amended. There's been clarification on the process for members declaring prejudicial interests during multi-location meetings, clarification of officer support arrangements, and updated guidance for participants joining a remote meeting, and updated guidance for chairs. So as I said, there are a few comments and things that have been provided over the past 12 months relating to the multi-location meetings. So we have tried to review the policy and incorporate these, and as I said, update it following now the removal of the requirements under COVID regulations. So it's presented to the committee really to consider and discuss, propose any amendments, and then it will be submitted to Council at this next meeting. Thank you.
Great. All seems like good common sense to me. I'm pretty supportive of the proposal to keep cameras on. I think that demonstrates that members are, participating adequately, and they're keeping abreast with developments of the meeting. So I'm pretty supportive of that. Just clarity really on the pilot of that. How is that going to be undertaken?
What we've been doing, as members will have seen themselves, is in various meetings, we've tried to start off with the smaller meetings and see how they've been in terms of supporting members with their cameras on. So it's been happening in scrutiny, it's been happening in licensing, it's been happening in meetings like this one today. And I know there has been a few concerns in relation to this, relating to where members may be having network issues. So that's why we've been piloting with the smaller ones before we hit Council with it and have 51. It's not going to be 51 cameras, because we do have a large majority, to be fair, in the Council chamber on Council days. But that would be, if anything, those types of meetings would be where we'd have the larger number of members with their cameras on, accessing remotely. As the report states in the financial implications, it does state, that there may be requirement for additional IT support to be provided if we find that some members are having IT connection issues. That will have to be provided within current budgets constraints, obviously, because of the budget that we have no room for growth. So we would have to consider it on a case-by-case basis with a clear business case provided by myself and the business manager and finance officer to fund any of this additional equipment if needed. And as I said, it's really for you to discuss whether you feel it, it's appropriate. I think at the very least, the monitoring officer has said, at the very least, members have to have their cameras on for voting, and they have to have their cameras on for speaking. So if for any issue, if technical, or I think there's been an issue raised by a member in terms of if the members are a little bit sick or unwell, for example. But as I said, the monitoring officer have been clear that the least has to be, following the legislation, to be seen and heard, that you have to have your cameras on if you are voting and if you are then speaking. So as I said, that's that one. But as I said, there's all sorts of various aspects in there, but that relates to the cameras. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. I think there was a case actually, I think it related to North Wales. There was one member who was conducting a meeting whilst driving a car, which is completely unacceptable, really, isn't it? Moving that aside, within your report, it also looks at, just quoting this, ask Democratic Services Committee to consider whether a more flexible approach should be acceptable when considering which meetings should be entirely remote in line with the policy itself. That to me, sounds like quite a big topic, really, and that is something that perhaps we should examine in isolation. Is that the intention, do you think, Rachel?
Yes, this is really, as I said, in terms of the starting point, but we have discussed between officers whether we consider at the next AGM whether the members have a call to hold some meetings entirely remote and some meetings hybrid. This is down to, the hybrid meetings are very resource intensive, particularly from a staffing point. And it may be that members wish to consider, as I said, at future, whether there's some meetings that could be considered remote. The policy allows for that. It's very flexible, so that's where you would have the remit to do that. So where, for example, we have a large turnout of members, we'd obviously, continue with the hybrid approach. But where maybe there's only 1 or 2 members turning up, we may decide there may be a decision by council to go entirely remote. I did a bit of research on this with other local authorities, and I know RCT, for example, they send out emails to a committee way before the meeting, and ask for them to identify if they intend to attend in person. If they don't get 4 interests to attend in person back before the send out, they put it out as a remote meeting. So they have set a limit for each of their committees then to ensure. So they do that to ensure that then they aren't providing the resource. Sometimes, as I said, it's 2 officers, sometimes 3 to support each hybrid meeting, whereas obviously remote, it is a lot easier for the officers to support it, and it's not so resource intensive. But as I said, I agree with you, Chair. I think that's something that will be considered in future, and if you wanted to consider it on your forward work programme for discussion, as something to discuss then, to take forward to the future AGM, to put forward to council your views, then that would be fine.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Thanks for clarifying that. I was going to clarify that myself, so that's helpful. I've got Councillor Spiller wants to make a comment on,
Thank you,
that.
Chair. It was going back to the previous point actually about cameras being on. I think it's very welcome that we've now got the bandwidth to be able to actually, look at remote members while we're talking across the screen. And it just really brings me back to a point in full council, really, that to vote on a decision, you have to be present in the room for the entire length of discussion. Without cameras being on for remote participants, with the greatest respect, we have absolutely no idea whether that particular councillor has been in front of his computer or her computer and actually taken part and listened to every argument in the debate, and obviously is then able to make an informed decision and vote at the end. And I really do feel that needs to be looked at, because otherwise you just end up with a process where people are voting on something. Well, actually, they're to call it the cynic in me, they actually haven't paid any attention to what was going on because they've not been partaking in it. And I really do think that, if we're looking at multi-location meetings, which offer a huge range of benefit, that we do need to think about that as well.
Good points, well made. I agree with that. I personally think, though, there should be some sort of common sense. I mean, if you're within the home, sometimes things happen outside your control. So, like, the postman might knock the door or something like that. So, let's be reasonable. If somebody turns their camera off for, a brief moment, a couple of seconds, 30 seconds or so, that is acceptable. But the point you make is a well-made one, and I agree with that. So
the reality is, though, Chair, sorry for coming back at you, but if someone was to leave the chamber to go and answer the door to take something from the postman, they wouldn't be able to partake in that particular discussion, and there's, even for a brief moment, they can miss those key things. So I understand completely what you're saying, and having 4 children in the house and 2 dogs, I completely understand on a personal level as well. But common sense tells you that those type of distractions can actually take people away from missing the content on the debate as well.
That's a fair point as well. I'll bring Councillor Aspie in.
Sorry, microphone's gone again. Just a quick point, as I say, with regards to what's right and what's not quite right. I mean, I've been staring at these 2 hobnob biscuits now for over an hour, and I thought to myself, do you have to turn your camera off while you eat these biscuits? Or, I know Councillor Spiller's had his apple, and Councillor James has had his slurp of his tea. So is it better to turn the camera off for them couple of seconds while we do it? Or do we have to... Well, I don't know whether you can eat or drink on meetings. Non-alcohol, by the way.
We're really opening a can of worms here now, aren't we? And I don't know the answer to that, really. I'm going to refer over to Rachel, I think, for that one.
We can still drink Anderson, Councillor Lapsey.
It's entirely a personal choice. I think if the decision is made for cameras on, in terms of that, as I said, they should be on if you're basing it on Councillor Spiller's point. But it really is, in terms of the chair's discretion, where they take it and whether, I know, as I said, other local authorities, when I've looked at them for this piece of work, they do take it sometimes where if you're not on camera, you're not participating in the meeting, you're not entitled to vote. Exactly the same as Councillor Spiller has said. It depends really how strict you want to go, and this is where it's open to you for discussion today. That's why it's here, to seek your views and to see what you want to recommend to council in relation to this. As I said, the monitoring officer has said, you know, at the least it's for voting, you'd have to have your camera on and to speak. But if you want to take it firmer, that's up to you and to make that recommendation forward. Funny enough, I discussed this with a member just before the meeting. You know, I know from my experience of other councillors in other local authorities when I've worked with them, you know, for health reasons, they've said, you know, I will eat in meetings because I've got a health condition that I have to eat at regular occasions, you know, relating back to, you know, how long meetings go on for. So, you know, it's entirely a personal choice in relation to that, really. So.
Yeah, great. And just to be clear, as chair of this committee, Councillor Asper, you're perfectly allowed to have your hobnob biscuit. I'm not going to begrudge you on that one. Councillor Walter, please.
Thanks, Chair. I broadly support where I think we are. I mean, the monitoring officer's ruling around being, if you want to partake and vote, you have to be visible and audible is spot on. Beyond that, I think it's down to individual responsibility. And of course, we're aware that every meeting, I think every meeting now is recorded, which means that your actions are visible to residents, members of the public and others. So we each have to take individual responsibility during every meeting that we're attending remotely. I've been on and off a couple of times. I can't afford hobnobs, but I may do with plain rich tea. You know, and I would do in a meeting in the chamber, being a type 1 diabetic. I make no excuse for that. But it's personal responsibility, I think, is about as far as we can go with it. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I'm sensing that we're all broadly agreeing on this. Just a little bit of clarity on the bit about future meetings, whether they should be hybrid or not. Where are we going with that one?
I can add that as a forward work programme item, Chair. That's not a problem, and we can have another discussion on that another time. Can I just seek members' comments in relation to these cameras, though? Are you generally in support of having encouraging cameras on at all times?
Yes.
With the caveat, obviously, in terms of, you know, if there's for technical issues, and with the chair's agreement, then if there's technical issues. But as I said, if that's a regular occurrence, we will look to support that. That's not a problem. But I mean, I think what other local authorities have done, they've said if there's technical issues, you advise the chair and you inform them and say that they've had to turn it off for some reason, and then, you know, attempts made to turn it back on at different times. And as I said, if that's a long-term problem, we will look to support that with IT.
There we are. That sounds good. Can I check everyone's in agreement with that? Yeah, looks like.
Aye.
Oh, we've got hands up again. What's this about then? Councillor Hughes,
okay.
Please.
Yeah, it's going back to one of Rachel's suggestions about the good practice in other local authorities about canvassing councillors' attendance before the meeting, because just to make the observation that if we'd applied the 4-member rule, we'd actually be holding this meeting entirely remotely. So I think it's a good idea. I think there are quite you know, savings to be made, aren't there? Use of premises, and it just keeps the balance of the meeting. So I'd certainly advocate that approach.
Great, thanks for that. Councillor Spiller as well.
Let me take my microphone off. Yes, okay. I did spot that I was talking to myself. I would broadly agree with Councillor Martin Hughes on that. You know, I think that canvassing members as to whether they're going to be attending remotely certainly saves on wasted time for staff as well, and certainly given the situation we as many other bodies find ourselves in, that can only be sensible. With regards to important items, and I know I'm harping on now. But for budget setting and things like that, I think it's entirely appropriate that we should go one step further, and we should insist that members have cameras on and are partaking to partake in the vote. Rachel mentioned that other authorities are following exactly that. I see no reason why we shouldn't make that recommendation to council if other local authorities are doing that. And as Councillor Walter points out, meetings are recorded. It does allow Democratic Services staff to go back and actually look at the transcripts and the recordings of the meetings as well. But it just gives that transparency and accountability to members of the public that the people that they are electing to represent them are doing exactly that.
Great. Thanks. That sounds good to me. Councillor Granville as well, please.
Well, just to say, I would support Councillor Spiller. If he wants to move it, I would second it as a recommendation from this council, from this committee.
Yeah.
Happy to move.
Good.
Second.
Sounds all agreement there. So we'll move on. Better practice what I preach and offer a short 10-minute break because we've come to the hour and a half point now. So what's the time now? Half past 11. Can we reconvene at 20 to 12, please? Thanks very much. See you then.